Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to See Through Panel, a comic book discussion podcast. My name is Cole Harvey. I am here with Fahed Rahman.
Hello, everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about Keith and Jeremy's Mystical Mysteries, a webtoon.
Written by Snowy Locks, and it follows the adventures of Keith Davis and Jeremy Dubois, who are two enterprising boy detectives who will take on any case they can get, even the weird ones. And the artists vary throughout the webcomic. The original artist was Alyssa RG, and then the second artist is Silver Thinks. This comic was sent to us via Instagram by Snowy Locks, who's a listener of the podcast, and he requested that we review it. So that's why we're kind of talking about it. So, let's kind of get straight into it, I guess. What were your initial impressions, Cole?
Well, first off, before I forget, I guess I haven't read, I think I just read the last chapter that Eliza draws.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know that she hops off of our duties.
Yeah.
I'm kind of sad to hear that because I really had grown fond of her style. But I'll get to that in a bit. So just before I get going, I read to the end of the second story, the Sigrid story.
Yeah.
I liked the Sigrid story a lot more than the first one. I thought there was a lot of growth in terms of both the art and the writing. I think I quite enjoyed this webtoon, even though it's not my typical fare. What about you?
Yeah, so we've been trying to record this episode for about 6 months or so, and so I think I've read this webtoon about 6 times, and I think familiarity's kind of bred contempt a little bit. I remember the first 2 or 3 times I read it, I quite enjoyed it. I think I was just sick of reading it by the time we've actually come down to discuss it. So I think I agree with you. This is not something that I would, if it was in, I don't read a lot of webtoons or comics on Tapas or anything like that. So this isn't my typical fare anyway. If I saw a manga like this on a bookshelf of a bookshop or a library, I wouldn't necessarily pick it up. It's not really the sort of thing that I'd typically read. But yeah, it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable. Yeah.
I definitely think this is only my either second or third reread while attempting to do this. And I think this time is when I've enjoyed it the most. I thought originally it was a bit of a kid's story because it's pretty PG, but then they come out with some curse words and some jokes about hentai, and I remembered that it is not a kid's story, even though it's a pretty it's about two young boys, and it's I would say it's fairly kid friendly, except for those few jokes, which always kind of made me it always caught me off guard.
Yeah, I think there's a fair amount of bad language in the book. Yeah. I think I'm not too sure if that's kind of deliberately playing around with using the language of the artistic language or the artistic kind of art iconography of a book that looks like it's aimed at kids, and then kind of playing around with some of the expectations around that. I wasn't too sure of the intention was to kind of parody or satire these adventure comics, like I'm thinking of something in the vein of like what's the name of that Adult Swim cartoon, The Venture Bros. Is something like that, or is it kind of intending to be an actual this person telling a story that's more kind of grounded? So, I mean, about the story itself, it's about Keith and Jeremy, the titular heroes, and they're basically a Scooby-Doo style mystery investigating squad. They investigate these mysteries that occur in their town, and the first mystery that they have to tackle is there's a burglary. And the person that's been burgled hires them to track down a missing item, essentially. So that's kind of where we get started, and we get thrown into kind of magical and sort of supernatural mayhem from there on in.
I think it definitely clicked with me for the second chapter. I really didn't. The first chapter was, I guess, technically a mystery, but it was more of more like a getting the team together where you're introduced to what feels like almost another primary character in Sion, I think it is.
Or Sion, how do you pronounce
Sion,
it?
yeah. And I liked it. It was definitely a lot shorter than the first one, at least it felt like it was. And it took me a while to get used to kind of how the story plays out, in the sense that how the pacing works with a webtoon like this, because I'm not really used to reading webtoons, and the pacing is fast, like very quick and very bite-sized chunks, and I'm not really used to that. Do you read a lot of webtoons?
I don't read a lot of webtoons, and I think there's kind of one or two, we've done a few on the show, and I think there's one or two ways that you can go with it. You can kind of either have each page tell its own story, or you can kind of really slow things down, and they very much went in the direction of each page being quite action packed, lots of action going on in there, zip zap zoom. And I think the pacing is something where I do feel that they could have afforded to maybe take the time a little bit longer, but maybe that's kind of you kind of, when you're writing these sort of things, maybe that's the sort of thing that he likes, or they liked it. I don't actually know whether Snowy Locks is a boy, girl, intergender, or whatever. So let's just use the word they. Whether that's the sort of thing they like to read. So yeah, in terms of the pacing, it is very, very, very quick. Maybe too hectic at times.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the fast pace. It's just sometimes it would throw me off a little bit how quickly we were moving, and the cuts between the chapters, I would get a little bit lost. And I was binge reading this. If I was reading this on a weekly schedule, or how it seems like they put it out almost weekly, then I would probably have to reread chapters beforehand, because the cuts are so abrupt and it's just so fast. And I did enjoy that, but it's definitely an acquired taste for me. I want to get a little bit into the art too.
Yeah, I mean, the art is, let's talk a little bit about that. Like, the first thing I want to say is, I think the first couple of screens or pages are a bit rough for me. I think, I don't know why, like, the quality is so different. At least when I was reading on my iPad, and I've kind of checked on my MacBook screen as well, it seems to be in slightly lower resolution than the rest of the pages, and especially with the lettering, I found it kind of quite difficult. I found it quite off-putting, to be honest with you. Kind of those first two pages, it kind of, I don't know why it's kind of been rendered in slightly lower quality, and the lettering for me was quite jarring to read. At times I couldn't quite make out. It's almost like you're squinting at it at some point, but the art, apart from those first couple of pages, is really quite nice.
Yeah, I actually didn't catch that, because I'm just reading this on either on my phone or a tablet most of the time. And I quite like Eliza's art. I think, it gets a little rough at the beginning, but as you go through it, she definitely evolves as an artist, and she's kind of got comic book storytelling down pat, which I like, because in a lot of webtoons, it's just a vertical scroll, and there's not a lot of play with panel structure or scene changes and things like that. But in this webtoon, she actually does kind of keep it to almost a traditional comic page a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Where it's not just that those vertical scrolling block panels, but I think she's got all of it down. Like, her characters are consistent from all angles. She knows how to do a reveal. She knows how to switch between the realistic faces to kind of the anime expressionistic emotions, where like the mouth is half the face and all that. And I really liked that. I like her. She's definitely got a manga influence style that I vibe with.
Yeah, I don't read as much manga as you do, so sometimes, like, it can be a bit like, when people are doing manga from like a Western perspective, it can be a little bit too. But I think she manages to capture the tone of the comic, of the story that Snowy's written quite well. The the character does. I quite enjoyed the way she animates the faces of characters. There's really clear expressions on the faces of the characters, and she does this clever thing where she's quite good at hiding what the characters are feeling, but you can tell the emotions that the character's trying to hide, if that makes sense.
Oh
Kind of
yeah.
like they don't want to reveal to the other person that they're feeling sad or anxious or angry about something. She's quite good at doing that, especially kind of in the second story, Sion, I believe it's called. And but yeah, and there's she does action quite well as like comedy too. So I think she does. I don't know if she was paid to do this or not, but I could easily see her kind of like making a living doing this as a professional comic artist.
Yeah, I definitely think she's capable of having making a career out of this if she wanted to. Because I think there was kind of an evolution on almost every chapter, where by the end of her run, I suppose, which must be 78 or 79 chapters.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's like a whole new artist in my opinion. She's much more consistent towards the end.
It's a shame that you didn't read what was it called, the latest one, because even though it's by a different artist, I think that's for me probably my favorite one of the stories, because there's some kind of quite clever there's kind of quite clever conceit at the center of it, and that's the art is, I kind of got used to Elisa's art, and while Silver Sphinx's art is quite good, it's always a bit jarring when you get a kind of change like that, especially because they render the characters quite differently, as well. One thing I do want to kind of mention a little bit quickly is the lettering. I don't think, for me, the lettering throughout isn't anything special, and I did find that on some panels it was occasionally difficult to follow the flow of the conversation. I think it's one of those things where I think there's maybe occasionally a few too many words on the page, but that sometimes happens with these things. It was never overly too bad, but I did feel kind of sometimes is that thing where the action of the page is quite heavy, and then there's also kind of quite a lot of lettering on there as well. And then unless you're really clever with that, that can kind of make it a bit of a headache to look at.
Especially in like the vertical scrolling comics, I think you have a lot more room to put the lettering down without getting in the way of the art or like making it difficult. But it's probably a difficult thing to adjust to.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if they have it entirely down. I think the balloons themselves are huge, and the lettering is like normal size.
Yeah, I think that's part of that. That's kind of a manga style, isn't it? A lot of like translated mangas do have these massive balloons, and then there's like a little bit of text in there, and that's sometimes occasionally that's a holdover of Japanese lettering, kanji, takes up a little bit more space, and sometimes that's a deliberate choice as well. I know kind of some letterers will do that deliberately because they want the words to have a specific impact, but I don't think that was kind of like the case here sometimes. So I think lettering is an art in itself, and it does, I think it would maybe pay to kind of get a separate letterer on board to kind of play around with it rather than just leaving it to the to one artist to do, or maybe Snowy does the lettering himself. I'm not entirely. Well, Snowy does the lettering themselves. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, I think the lettering, for me, if there's one standout thing that could be improved, it would definitely be the lettering.
If it's the artist doing the lettering, I could maybe see why the balloons are larger, because it covers up some art and maybe helps with deadlines and it's all in one type of thing.
Yeah.
But if Snowy's is lettering this over the art, and I feel like it's almost a detriment to the artist to cover up this much of their art with empty word balloon space.
Yeah. I mean, it does get a lot better throughout. So, but some of those early chapters are kind of a little bit rough. We should maybe kind of talk about Keith and Jeremy's characters a little bit. So Keith is he's basically the heavy muscle. He's this hot-headed type person, and Jeremy is kind of a softer spoken, more intellectual type. How did you find their characters?
I thought they were good. I thought they were pretty compelling, and I like their dynamic. I think they're a pretty clever duo for a type of Scooby Doo type situation.
Yeah.
I enjoy them on their own, but I think I like them better with Scion or Sion or whatever with them. I think it's better as a trio. I also really love Keith's mom as a character. I think she brings a lot to the. I think she helps show off the differences between Keith and Jeremy when they're both interacting with her.
Yeah, I agree with that. There were a couple of things about their relationship I was a little bit kind of confused about. So in the blurb that I just read out, it mentions that they are 13 and 11 years old. They come across a lot older than that. I was thinking maybe, especially Keith, I thought he was maybe like 17, 18 years old. And maybe Jeremy was around 12, 13, especially because I think there's one scene early on where to me it appears that they're going out on the lash, they're going out boozing.
Yeah,
stuff.
Was it? I had a question about that too, because that's probably supposed to be like not beer then, but it seemed like
it seemed like they were I don't know.
I'm not sure either. Because it'd be an interesting choice for the 12-year to show the 12-year-old getting drunk or 11-year-old.
11-year-old getting drunk, and kind of that's the other thing that kind of confused me a little bit earlier on as well. Is kind of all of them look like Scion, Jeremy, and Keith all look pretty similar ages to me. So I didn't. There's a part early on where I keep on getting them confused. Keith kind of shouts quite loudly at Scion for doing something, and Jeremy's like, "Oh, you why are you shouting at that kid for?" And just, you all look kind of like the similar age.
If anything, I would think he's older as Scion.
Yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things I found a little bit confusing about. I don't know what you felt.
I thought it was a little strange. Yeah, I didn't put much stock into it after the first story, but on the original story, I do remember getting to that part with the beer bottle and being like, I'm not sure what's going on. Is it like a joke that he's? I don't really know. I think the second story just flowed a lot better for me and kind of showed that they were, children the way that, all the adults are like, you can't be doing this. You guys are kids. None of the stuff you're doing makes any sense. And they basically have to listen to everyone else, and they do. But one thing I almost forgot to mention that I do think worked was a lot of the humor in this worked for me. A lot of it didn't, but a lot of it did. So I'd say probably 60-40. I think 60% of it did. Some of it I felt was kind of half-hearted, but a lot of the times the gags would kind of actually work for me and bring me more into the story. But when they missed, they kind of pulled me out a little bit, and it was kind of thin. The writing was kind of, I don't think that they'd earned a lot of the jokes, but when they did earn them and it worked in the story, I actually got a few actual laughs out of me, which is pretty hard to do with comics for me.
Yeah. I think I would that for me, I think this is maybe, I felt like I was missing a lot of the jokes because I think a lot of the jokes maybe felt referential to manga comics that I hadn't read before or hadn't heard about. So it's kind of, I felt there was a lot of jokes in there where this feels like it's referring to some other material that I'm not maybe aware of. I do think kind of Keith's quite a funny character. This kid that's just prepared to punch his way out of almost any problem, rather than kind of think his way through logically. Is kind of like, oh, if there's something in my way, I'm just going to play. I quite like characters like that. Their first instinct is kind of violence. So I did like that about the character. What did you think of their relationship? Do you think it's going to kind of maybe blossom into something romantic?
I have no idea, honestly. I don't,
because there's kind of slight overtones, especially in the second story, kind of that mirroring between what's the name of the mother? Alex's relationship with the ghost
Sigrid.
With Sigrid in there, between like Keith and Jeremy's relationship.
Yeah, there is, and I also was noticing the the semi-romantic stuff with Alex and Sigrid, but I had not thought about, because there is a lot of like thematic linking of the two couples of characters. I hadn't thought about the way that crossed over. I would be fine with that. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I guess you've read more than me, right? Have you read the entire third?
No, I've
Okay.
yeah. So the how far did I get? I got up to, so that the last arc I read was basically there's a man that's kind of turned up and he's lost his memory. I think is the last one that I read, and that was quite an enjoyable arc because there's kind of the bad guy. So basically, each story kind of features a supernatural element, and I particularly liked the mechanic that they employed in the third story. I thought that was kind of quite clever writing, and kind of made for kind of quite a what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like an ominous kind of like threat to the group, which I kind of quite enjoyed. So yeah, that I kind of quite like that.
I'm gonna have to read the next chapter because I'm curious. But
yeah,
one thing I also almost forgot: Nurse Tony. I thought he was hilarious most of the time he was on the page.
Yeah,
great character.
Yeah.
He's the real only one that's like, these guys are kids. Why do we listen to anything they say?
Yeah. So it's kind of like it's I did enjoy that. It's just I wasn't too sure in the world in which this takes place whether like supernatural things are kind of quite common knowledge, and whether or not kids doing this sort of thing is acceptable or not, and kind of having Tony there to kind of ground it down a little bit more in reality, I felt kind of helped square things out a little bit for me. So yeah, I think that's a good shout there.
That's a good point though. I was confused too, pretty much through the whole thing, whether this was normal for these kinds of things to be happening, because people are surprised when they happen, but not that surprised. Like the dragon, they were like, "Oh shit, a dragon!" But it didn't really go much further than that.
Yeah, it's got, okay. There's a dragon, and yeah, there's kind of ghosts and things of that nature, and then there's quite extensive use of magic as well. So
yeah,
that's also kind of quite interesting. I think we've been kind of talking about this for about 25 minutes now. For me, look, I don't think it's aimed at me. I think it's probably aimed at people that enjoy reading manga a little bit more than I do. I thought it was that I think I'll give you my opinion after my first couple of times reading it. I thought it was a fun adventure story that's worth checking out. After my sixth time of reading it, I got fed up with it a little bit.
That's understandable.
So I kind of like take that as you will. I think it's definitely worth checking out. It's I don't want to sound snide by saying this, but it's pretty competent storytelling, which I don't think it's harder to do than you think. I think Keith and Jeremy have got they're interesting characters with an intriguing dynamic. It'll be kind of interesting to see how their relationship develops, kind of going forward. And yeah, there's kind of like there are some, Snowy does kind of write some clever, he uses some intriguing and inventive uses of magical bad guys as well.
Yeah, I thought I would probably agree with most of that. It's fun. It's a fun like adventure romp. Interesting characters all the way through. Not super deep. I don't mean that as an insult or anything, but I mean what you see is what you get. There's not a lot of heavy themes or subtext or anything, which is not an issue. I like that. I like reading something I can just pick up and have a good time and put it down.
Yeah.
I would recommend it. Yeah, I'm not a big webtoon reader or anything, so I don't know like what the average competency is on there for storytelling, but this feels like it was pretty well done.
I mean, we did kind of like early on, we did review a couple of webtoons where one of them was really well written, and then the other one had kind of like serious flaws. So I think this kind of sits somewhere in the middle between those ones. I think the art is really good. I think we kind of mentioned that we both really enjoyed the art throughout. I mean, there's kind of some technical issues, especially early on in terms of like the quality of the rendering on some of those early pages, and there's some issues around the lettering as well. But apart from that, I think it's really quite strong, and the dialogue is hit more often than miss as well. So yeah, I think it's well worth checking out if you're into your webtoons.
Yeah, definitely agree.
It's also available on Tapas as well, but I think the Webtoon app is slightly better. Cool. Any closing thoughts?
No, other than in terms of just the podcast in general, I've had some strange health and technological problems, but I'm attempting to get back here weekly.
Yeah. We're trying to get back weekly. Cole is currently trying to update his software. He is, of course, an Android. No, we've had kind of like some technical issues, and I've started a new job, which means I'm not as available to. Whereas before I could kind of record whenever. Now I'm kind of working, and Cole has now got a job, and a lot of stuff has happened. But we'll try and get back onto a weekly recording thing. So yeah, guys, if you've got any other webtoons that you think we should check out, please email us at seathroughpanel@gmail.com, or you can direct message us on seathroughpanel on either Instagram or Facebook. Thank you again to Snowy Locks for supporting the podcast and sending us his comic to review. No idea what we're going to be doing next, but we'll kind of keep you updated as to when we're going to be releasing a new episode.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for chatting, Thad.
Okay, see you guys. Thanks. Bye.